Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Analyst Eye, brought to you by the Guinness Pro 14. I'm Murray Kinsella, the 42.ie. Delighted to be here after an excellent first weekend of the Pro 14's restart. And joining me for the next 4 weeks is a man who lives and breathes the game. It's the one and only Sean Holley of Premier Sports. How are you, Sean? How much did you enjoy that weekend of rugby?
Oh, I loved it, Murray. Thanks for welcoming me. I'm really excited about the Analyst Eye. You and I sort of throw in some analysis and stats back together. And it was one of those weekends, wasn't it? You know, we've been starved of rugby, and to have such great rugby, really good contests, two of which we're going to really look at in this first episode, was just a welcome back, wasn't it? How was it for you?
Yeah, loved it. I loved our little WhatsApp group we set up for this because you're getting really good information, nice stats. I know the plays that you're going to enjoy as well. And it's just brilliant to be talking about current games. We've reviewed so many old games and look back, but now we're talking about what's happening. We've got playoffs just over the horizon. So really exciting. This show as well really excites me. I guess to let people know what it's all about, we're going to be digging into teams, tactics, plays, coaches, all sorts of stuff. And Sean, we've got some pretty cool stats as well to throw in there.
Yeah, bespoke stats as well, Murray. You know, you and I, along with the guys at Guinness Pro 14, particularly Paul Arton and Jacob, have done a sterling job putting together. And behind the scenes, we've been sort of thrashing around, what are some of the things that our listeners, followers, viewers might not have seen or heard before that are interesting, the trends in the game. And we've got some new ones that we've come up with that are, pretty hard hitting, even in this first weekend in Guinness Pro 14, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get stuck into them, but just to remind people and to call for your questions for next week, if you use the hashtag AnalystEye, and we'll do our best to answer some of those questions next weekend. We want to get everyone involved. Get your rugby nerd side out and fire in your questions. We are rugby nerds, so we're more than happy to take them. Listen, let's start with the 22 entry stuff. This is a big one for us, isn't it? We're keen because this is what teams are talking about. This is how they measure performance. And we get a little run through of it there, Sean, in terms of what we're going to actually look at.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here that some jargon, if you like, that we're going to use. The first is efficiency percentage inside the 22. So when teams get into the opposition's 22, what does it mean? It means how they perform inside of there, major bearing on winning and losing, we feel, looking at the stats. It's measuring the entries into there, how effective the teams are, and the pressure they put on defensive discipline, speed of play, and positions they're most likely to score from. So it's a real all-round picture of how good teams are when they get into the 22. What metrics factor in? Well, things like scoring to entry ratio. That's something we'll talk about. How many scoring opportunities they've created, unforced errors, and how many penalties and free kicks they've forced, maybe yellow cards out of the opposition as well. But the fundamental difference, and I suppose the end game, Murray, for us, is the scoring percentage inside the 22. So teams get in there, but how do they actually convert that pressure into points? And that's going to be a major factor, because we're sort of finding some trends that the best teams obviously have the highest scoring percentage once they're in the 22.
Yeah, and we even saw it this weekend. We're going to put up some of the stats from this weekend's past games, but it does really mark the difference between teams, how clinical they are when they get in there. And most of it won't surprise people. This is the efficiency here. Munster at the top of the chart there in terms of getting into the 22 and keeping a bit of pressure on. They won a few penalties on a couple of occasions, but as we'll see with the scoring rate percentage, rather, they didn't quite get there on a few of those visits. But I mean, it kind of paints a nice picture, Sean, doesn't it, of how clinical teams are there. Connacht, Leinster, no surprise given what we saw from their attack.
Yeah, and the Ospreys were better too, but Munster fans should beware a little bit. They're looking at their number one ranking in terms of their efficiency in the 22, and they were much better in getting in there and applying pressure. But then you convert that to the scoring percentage, and they rank 6th. So that's still an issue for Munster, and that's the intriguing thing about this for our followers and listeners to look at that scoring percentage and see where they're converting. No surprise, of course, that Leinster are in the top 2 in efficiency and then ranked number 1 in the scoring, because that's what they're so good at. Now, we took a real good look at Leinster against Munster in the Aviva Stadium on the weekend. And it was such a brilliant game, Murray. I know you covered it as well. Really exciting stuff. The Leinster do remain unbeaten. They got over the line at the end. JJ Hanrahan could have equalised with a conversion late at the end. But we're now to have a little look at that. We're going to look at Munster. why aren't they really converting? Have they improved in that 22 with a couple of new signings? We've got a spotlight on a young up-and-coming one to watch, Ryan Baird. And, of course, we'll take a closer look at Farrell and De Allende as a combination. You were excited about that one, aren't you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching the pair of them. I have to say, Ringrose and Henshaw with Leinster were outstanding as well. It was a brilliant midfield battle, and I'm really excited about Ryan Baird. As you mentioned, we're going to have a look at a few of his clips, but his third start for Leinster at the age of 21, obviously the biggest derby in Irish rugby, and he really excelled. There were a couple of errors, as we'll see, but loads to be excited about. We'll start, though, with that 22 play, because it was fascinating again, this game, as always. The trend in the past has been Munster missing chances, but Leinster have always been clinical.
Yeah, they are. I mean, the first three entries into the 22, they came away with points. That's why their scoring percentage, their ratio is so high. You know, they're very organised in this department. They're quite patient as well. You know, there's going to be an end up in a try of Cian Healy now latching onto the ball. But look how they're all on their feet working hard. You've even got James Lowe, the winger, in there, and they squeeze over in the 20th minute. Munster had scored early on. But it's not just scoring tries that we're looking at. Now, this sort of line-out attack goes a little bit awry. It's not clean ball off the line-out. But again, this is where Leinster are so good. They're weighty guys. They're heavy. They carry in numbers. You see them latching on. Max Deegan driving guys forward. They're into the 22. So in our stats now, we're recording with the guys here how effective they are in applying pressure. So that's where that percentage comes from. And you can see now that they've won a penalty. So that would be a big plus. Now, do they convert that effectiveness? Well, yes, they do, because Sexton steps up and they take the points. And then later on in the half, and as usual with Leinster, just before half time, they score. They're behind on the scoreboard again. But this is very reminiscent of Exeter Chiefs in the English Premiership. You know, when they get here, they come away with points. And as long as it takes, it doesn't matter for a Leinster team. They have enough X factor and enough power to work it through. What was really good for me is that we saw a slight difference in attack. Brilliant from Henshaw, sublime kick through. And then it's not just in the 22, you know, off 1 and 2 phases, they have X factor players, Murray. And that's the difference, I think, between these two sides at the moment. Sexton's X factor holds the pass up. This young kid you mentioned is going to be brilliant. And the gas of James Lowe, watch out for him in a green shirt, you Irish fans. So, you know, pretty clinical.
Yeah, that's about as clinical as you get, straight into the 22 and score without anyone barely touching you. And that play was just brilliant. Built off the back of an excellent choke tackle turnover by Sexton and Van der Fleer, wasn't it? Where they seized momentum back. I think just a couple of minutes before that, they'd been down in the 22, and a rare miss by them, actually. They went off their feet at that breakdown from the 5-metre scrum. But I love that attacking kick from Henshaw. They've been working hard in that area. And just to add another string to what is already a pretty impressive bow is just fantastic for them. From Munster's point of view, Sean, what do we see in terms of the 22 stuff? As I say, the trend in the past, we've been looking back, and they've missed chances in this big fixture against Leinster. What do we see this time around?
Well, they tried a number of things in the last two semi-finals. You know, they've tried pick and go. They've tried coming around the corner. But here we can see now they're trying to batter away. And the line shows how many Leinster guys are on their feet. You know, over 50% of the time, Leinster have 14 or 15 players on their feet. And Munster have to work out how they shorten that line and find gaps and get some width and some space in the outside. Look at Leinster again, all on their feet. They've even got somebody in the background. It's McGrath, and he comes to the line, identifies, and gets the turnover. So Munster are just a little bit narrow and trying that. Now, even though this is a maul, and this is where Leinster perhaps are so confident in their front 5 guys, they're holding Munster up close to the line here, but they've still got 3 forwards inside of Johnny Sexton. So when it does come to Farrell in the end, the pressure's on him from the defence, and he turns the ball over. So that's why, you know, that conversion rate perhaps has put Munster into 6th position in terms of the scoring, as opposed to finishing top this week in the efficiency of getting in the 22. They get in there, but they're not clinical enough.
Yeah, there's little subtleties, even in that first example where Chris Farrell knocks on the ball. I actually kind of like what they're trying to do. They set up that shape with the double blocker play. There's a bit more, you know, passing focus, even not just one out from the ruck. They obviously botched it that time. It wasn't fluid at all times, but you can see what Stephen Larkham is trying to do. Like, traditionally, we know Munster, it's pretty blunt in the 22, isn't it? That maul is usually so effective. It's one out carries, it's pick and jam. Conor Murray maybe having a snipe using his physicality. But I think it's actually good to see them trying to add a few layers. And I mean, when it came around to their 3 tries, I think we saw that really well, that They are trying to push things.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Chris Farrell there, he was man of the match, but I think that De Allende, one of the new signings, had a real calming influence on Farrell, and they worked really well together when Munster got into the 22 in that first half and sorry, in the second half, and battered away, but in a slightly different way. So look at Farrell now, right? He's coming in a forward carrying position, but he gets across the gain line. Look at Farrell and De Allende again. We've sort of moved this on and switched it. Now there's options. Yes, forwards are working around to be carriers, but look at these two. They're offering something different, and they're just getting the headlights of the Leinster defenders up. Now look how condensed Leinster are all of a sudden. Look where De Allende is. There's forwards waiting to carry, but Murray goes across to De Allende, and that's now cut the line. The last defender, Ringrose, has had to really come in and look at the space on the outside. So, Larkman's using De Allende and Farrell really well already to just get across those forwards, cut the Leinster line and force them to come in, leaving spaces on the outside. And we saw that quite a bit. So I think De Allende is going to be a very shrewd pickup for Munster.
Yeah, you've got to respect both those guys. Even if you have a sense that it's going to be that decoy line, you've got to respect it because they're so powerful. What I really like is, and I think we've all discussed this now, I think the perception that they're just one-track players is gone now. Chris Farrell and De Allende have both shown they're superb distributors. They can pass, they can offload. Even Farrell's touch for the Conway, his second try right at the end, to play out the back when he's also posing that direct threat. That's what you want from your centres, to have a kind of all-court game, and they're offering that. I think it's exciting for Munster to build on that and get that familiarity up. But even for the first time around, Sean, they look pretty good together defensively.
Oh, they did. And again, Farrell has been renowned for jumping in, using his physicality, but De Allende's a good reader in defence. Here he slips off the block runner and Farrell stays close to him, tucks in, forces them back inside. So they've got the gas to push them to the outside. Here's a set play from Leinster. Look how tight they are. They turn their hips. They're not facing the touchline. They're still in a good 45, force them to the outside, but they get to outside shoulders. And that's really important because what they will do to Leinster and other teams is they'll force them back inside. This is a great example because of the double efforts from two centres. Imagine having two physical centres that tackle and then force like this. Leinster tried to play from deep. Look at De Allende turning in, but he eases off, and Farrell does the same. We would have seen Farrell jump in there. That allows Conway to spot in, and the two are just covering in behind. It snuffed out Leinster's sort of real sort of will to attack from deep, and they force a turnover in their 22. So, it was good stuff to see. There is a caveat to this, because they're becoming really good, and the more they work together, you see them coming up, pushing up, not helter-skelter, but they just work in that space, and they work hard, as I say, to the outside shoulder, and they force the runners back inside. The caveat is, of course, when this happens, and watch De Allende again, just on the outside, first up, is if they work hard on the outside shoulder, the inside defenders have to go up nice and true. If they don't, dancers like Ringrose, then they're going to pick off those big guys on the inside. So a little bit to work on still on the inside for Munster.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of getting used to, especially a new face in the middle of the field like De Allende, but they're going to get so much out of him. I love that second effort that you mentioned. Every single ruck, if you go back and watch it, he makes a tackle, he's back on his feet, causing havoc and adding another attacking body into that clear out. Just brilliant to see. I'm excited to see how they progress. I'm also very excited about Ryan Baird, who we mentioned earlier on, because there aren't too many 21-year-old locks who step into a game, their third senior start, as I mentioned before, a guy who has been on the radar, I'll be honest, in Ireland for a long time. When he was playing Leinster School Senior Cup, it was flagged that he was going to be something special, a real good athlete, and we saw loads of examples, Sean, didn't we?
Well, mate, it's a bit of a shame RG Snyman went off because I would like to see him up against. But look, he's still a little bit raw. A couple of errors in his game, a little knock on in the 22. That's to be expected. But, when our producer asked, who's the one to watch for you? I said, well, this guy was in my face all game. He's like a young John Eales, lovely carry there. This is absolutely, fantastic work rate, getting around the corner. He's overtaking people. And I remember Alan Wynne-Jones as a youngster like this, gets to that outside, squares up. And we'll see this shot from behind now. how he carries the ball in two hands. This is one for all the youngsters and coaches to watch here, because he's worked hard around the corner, squared up, ball in two hands, a little pump, and passes the ball at perfect timing, commits the tackler. That's a rare talent for a second row, as I say, like a young John Eales. He doesn't quite get the ball here, but his reactions are fantastic. He runs to the open and he falls to the open. This is important. He falls to the open to negate the jackler and make it better for McGrath. Textbook tackle, but watch his work rate now. Jordan Lama was having some problems under the high ball from Conor Murray, but he's aware, he's a footballer. He tracks back. He thinks, hang on, Jordan, I'll help you out here. And he catches it above his head, tracking back, and then he has the presence of mind to get to his knees so that there's a tackle and they can't hold him up. Again, the awareness of the back of the line out. He's a footballer. He reads the play, the athleticism to get down and pick up. This is a little bit risque, but a bit of youthful exuberance, perhaps, with the out of side door offload. And again, look, textbook tackling from him. He's the whole package, and he's chasing a kick in the last minute here. And our last shot, he's emptied the tank. The attitude of the guy, I mean, he's one to watch, Murray. You must be impressed with him.
Yeah, really impressed. I mean, this is a guy who's been in the Ireland squad, training with them during the Six Nations earlier this year. So clearly on the radar there. Definitely one to watch. And I guess James Ryan's injury, although obviously a negative for Leinster, it opens a door for someone else. And that's the thing with Leinster. There's always someone ready, knocking at that door, ready to take the chance. And Baird's going to be one of those guys. They'll hope to have Ryan obviously back next month at some stage, but really exciting to see where Baird goes next. And as you say, athleticism, skill level, intelligence as well. We understand he's pretty good at the line out. Obviously, that didn't go great for Leinster last day, or that high ball area, which we'll probably come back to in a couple of weeks. But I think he just underlined his potential. I mean, you touched on Snyman just briefly there. We should come back to that, because what a blow for Munster. Torn ACL 7 minutes into his debut. And I mean, he was in the process of stealing a line-out ball. You'd seen his athleticism around the pitch, even following up a few kicks. How would you be feeling, Sean, if you were in Johan van Graan's boots now?
I'd be absolutely devastated, because, the analysis that we talked about, Murray, about getting some more ball carry in that 22 X factor, and the yin and the yang of having Farrell and De Allende a little bit wider out, and then him, would have been really good for the progress of that scoring percentage rate that Munster are slightly lacking behind Leinster in. So it's a massive blow, isn't it? You can, I don't know. It's a bit like signing Harry Kane, and he gets knocked out as your number one goal scorer in the first game he plays. So, but we used to call them thunderbolts as coaches. Another guy will step up. There'll be a young Munster kid that'll come in. People like Billy Holland will have to step up to the plate. CJ Stander now will probably have to really come to the fore as a ball carrier, Omani. So it's devastating, but these things happen. Let's just hope he recovers quickly and he comes back for them.
Yeah, we were actually talking to Stephen Larkham about it a little bit earlier on. He said they're going to back what they have there. And one guy definitely to watch is Thomas Ahern, who started for the Ireland under-20s earlier this year. They're very excited about his potential, and certainly in the kind of Snyman mold. He's athletic, he can play ball, he can offload. So definitely, again, if a door opens, there's a guy who potentially will take it. So let's see what happens with Munster. We're expecting them to meet Leinster again in the semi-finals. They obviously have to get over the line next weekend and secure their semi-final, but what a matchup that will be in the semi-final.
It will be, and they've given them a frightener, haven't they? They've run them really close. They've shown some improvement in their attacking game, scored 3 tries. Who's to say? They learn. Who's to say they can't do it?
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Now, Murray, it's time to turn our attention to another semi-finalist who qualified last weekend. Richard Cockerill's men have earned a home semi-final against Ulster. It's their second appearance in the knockout stages in the Guinness Pro 14 in 3 years. And how have they done it? Well, a lot of people will think Richard Cockerill's side will be grunt and set piece and, just a good culture, but they're turning out to be a lot more than that. Winners of their conference, and defence has been a big aspect of that, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's timely, isn't it? Given that knockout rugby is around the corner, as you mentioned, defences win titles we're told so often, and they'll feel that they're very confident in this area. Last weekend was superb. Everything they did was built on the back of the defence, even some of the scoring, which is it's another layer that they've added. We get an example of a passage here. We've highlighted Nick Groom here. He's just back to his feet. He's going to make a tackle there and back to his feet. He's going to head off into the backfield now. We'll come back to him a little bit later, but he's dropping in behind the defensive line. Over on that short side, you can see McAnally. He's communicating. They ease off to give themselves time, and they make that tackle. Now they're going to get the line speed back with that big open side. You're going to see in midfield here, getting up hard, closing down that passing option for Hastings and sending him back inside. Again, something very similar here. Grigg has to duck back inside. There's those big forwards with a nice slowing, wrestling tackle, slowing things down. They've split the pitch, but again, there's that backfield coverage. There's Nick Groom, who's kind of close up to the left edge, and Blair Kinghorn has swung from the right-hand side of the backfield up to support him. Really good communication, but that's what you can do when you get players on their feet, which they did superbly in this game. Then you see the quick tap. Again, that Richard Cockerill perception is that this is not what his team is going to do, but Edinburgh have added these layers and they're unsettling the Glasgow defence again here. Glasgow do get a good tackle on. They try to slow it up. The ball comes loose, and there's another aspect of the Edinburgh game. Van der Vaart gets on the ball, sees that kick space, puts it in behind. Now Glasgow are turning. They're uncomfortable. They've only been on the attack, 20 seconds ago, and they make the error, walking it into touch. And Edinburgh are actually going to score off the back of this sequence. You'll see Glasgow, they're going to clear their lines here, but Edinburgh are set for a counter-attack, a kick return. Again, they've worked on this area. Van der Merwe passes in field. They straighten back up. They're going to split the pitch here with a midfield ruck. Really clever, because now Glasgow have to defend both sides and they can hit back to the left. I love this from Dean, just straightening, fixing. There's Van der Merwe back on the ball. Just so good on the ball. And that lovely inside support line from Nick Groom, who was just outstanding, so influential in this game. But just kind of sums up what they did. I mean, some of the stats from Paul Larter are brilliant stats guide. 94 tackle percentage rate, 73% tackle dominance. That's really impressive. And 50% of the phases they defended, they actually had 14 players on their feet. Like, that just gives you such a massive advantage to have those numbers.
Yeah, when you go to see, I commentate on Edinburgh, when you are up close at the ground, they're a big unit, they're big physical animals, and you showed there's a lot of hard work in defence, but you're right, defence does win titles. Now, we've got a breakdown expert, a coaching expert coming up later in the show, but it's a key area this first weekend of Guinness Pro 14, and there were a number of turnovers by Edinburgh that made them quite successful in the game against Glasgow as well.
Yeah, I think teams are seeing the opportunity with the interpretations, the refocus, the jackal getting rewarded a bit more. Edinburgh had 9 turnovers in this game, and a nice variety as well. We're going to see a few of the different examples. Just watch Rory Sutherland here, back on his feet. He's made the previous tackle, and he tackles again. Really good work rate. It allows McAnally in over the ball. And again, that jackal gets rewarded a little bit earlier than we've seen before. Their phase defence was just so committed. Again, they have numbers on their feet. Look, there's one guy on the ground, 14 on their feet. Really good low tackle technique. And again, it opens that window. Hamish Watson wins the race, gets his reward, but that tackle technique was superb all day long. You see Mata is over the ball there trying to slow it down. Glasgow shift to the left, and this time it's going to be a strip in the tackle. Van der Vaart, the out half, he's making turnovers as well. Every single player has that mentality. And I just love this clip. They kick it away. It's a poor kick, but the chase, the defensive work rate actually turns into a good kick. You can see there that Bryce is outnumbered. It's Bennett this time, the centre, getting on the ball, clean turnover. And here's this mentality. Again, you wouldn't associate this with a traditional Cockrell team, but this is what Edinburgh are about now. Turnover ball, shift into space. Obviously, outstanding work from Charlie Sheehan. A good day for Edinburgh scrum halves, but I love that turnover mentality. Transition is massive in the game, isn't it, Sean? Just because disorganised defence, happy days.
Yeah, kick receipt and turnover ball. Coaches spend a lot of time in training on that sort of stuff now because the defences are so disorganised. And Edinburgh need those key players if they're to win this Guinness Pro 14 title. Duan van der Merwe, what a beast he is, and the well-known players, but also some of the younger players and some of the other recruits. Now, they need to step up and show their potential too. One guy that we got our eye on, and we have for a while, and you like, is fullback Blair Kinghorn.
Yeah, I really like him. It feels like he's been around for ages. He's only 23. I just had to check before he came on. And as Paul highlighted before we came on, he went to 3 under-20 World Cups. So he's been long touted. And I think we're really starting to see maturity in his performances. He is a difference maker. He's got a unique frame. He's got a unique skill set. He can beat defenders. He's got pace. And we're going to see some of those things in action from last weekend because he was that difference maker. He sees Xander Fagerson there in the defensive line, a prop. There's a chance. So he dummies. He backs himself to beat him. It's a really good vision to pick out that opportunity, and it creates a brilliant opportunity for Edinburgh. Again, here off the ball, there's been a turnover, and he's showing in the right place to get on the ball. I really like this kick as well. Keep it alive and just apply that pressure onto Glasgow. He makes the follow-up tackle, and now Glasgow are pinned in their 22 in a position they don't want to be in. Like everyone else, listen, Kinghorn was rusty. Everyone was after a long break, and here the error leads to a pretty important penalty early on in the game. But he recovered well, and I thought he was assured again. Under the high ball, he was solid. There's a sign of the rustiness as well, just that little slice. I actually think he has a good kicking game. We'll see a better example very shortly, but at least he could have a bit of a laugh at himself here. And he's a guy who plays with a smile on his face. That's why he's so enjoyable to watch for me. This is an example of his good kicking and of that vision again, that ability to break a game apart. It's slightly broken up here, and just to pick out the kick space on the move, really good technically, over to Sow on the right-hand side, and they score against Munster. That's an older clip, but it just shows what he can do. And I think you're bang on, Sean. If they're going to take that next step, you need those players to make a difference in the biggest games. Yeah,
well, Stuart Hogg holds the 15 shirt for Scotland, but surely if Kinghorn keeps up with this sort of form, then Scotland are going to have to find a place for him, or who knows, move Stuart Hogg up to the front line. We'll see. But great clips, great analysis there, Murray. Breakdown was obviously something that's really, really important. I think the first weekend of the restart of Guinness Pro 14 saw, on average, 5 penalties more than usual at the breakdown. And we got a special guest coming up, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got Jimmy Duffy from Connacht joining us, a guy who's a real specialist around the breakdown. But as he's going to explain, like everyone, he's having to adapt. The players are having to adapt. The referees are as well. It'll take a while to get there. We've seen it across the board in all the other leagues and competitions. A couple of weeks to settle down, but it was fascinating stuff in that regard. And really looking forward to seeing what Jimmy has to say. Well, Jimmy, thanks a million for joining us on the Analyst Eye. How's all in Galway? You must be buzzing after that win over Ulster.
Yeah, look, I think it was. I think someone had said it was 174 days since we last had a game, so it was nice to have something to review that mattered to us, I suppose. But yeah, I think across the two games in the provincial derbies, I think they served up so really good battles, and I think people can be justifiably proud, I suppose, after such a long layoff that the rugby was quality. And I think I've only started reviewing some of the other games in the Pro 14, and equally as much people are looking to play ball, and it's great to once again, suppose, see live rugby on these shores. Yeah,
well, we were really impressed with your with your attacking performance, obviously, but we want to chat about the breakdown. I think, Sean, you're gonna take over, because I know you're passionate about this area, Sean.
I am, because it's new, and yet it's not new, Jimmy, isn't it? And you'd be pleased to know I was the only pundit on Premier Sports to tip Connacht to win this weekend as well. But I was just going to ask, really, with the new interpretations, because there's no new law as such. I mean, how did you approach the Ulster game in game week in particularly with no recent footage?
Yeah, look, I think obviously we spend a lot of time watching the Super Rugby, but I suppose, Sean, as you know, the breakdowns are measurably different, I suppose, Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. I suppose in the Southern Hemisphere, there's a focus on an individual jackler getting there pretty rapidly, and if he has good purchase on the contest, then he follows through. Whereas here, you're looking at in some of the, I suppose, the provincial games, which we focused on particularly, there's a strong jackal effort, but there's also a strong supporting effort with that jackal. So in some instances, you may have 4 hands around the ball, and if you're not, I suppose, very economical with your bullets or your first support player, you're going to run into some problems. And I think before it used to be a focus directly on the ball, whereas now people can get on the levers, they can get around the chest, they can get around the hips. So that you've got a 100 kilo plus player holding on to another 100 kilo plus player. It's a tough target to shift. And I suppose the big focus for us is if you're late, it's at your own peril. If the ball carrier doesn't, I suppose, win that contest on his terms, and the support player isn't there rapidly, you can run into some significant problems. And the referees are blowing the jackal effort a lot quicker than they would have in the past. Probably a big focus, I suppose, across all the games that I've seen in the Pro 14, the 2 provincial ones on the weekend, and I've watched some of the other derbies, is if you land in the lap of the jackler, you're in real trouble. So we just focused on dominating that contact initially and trying to find some space around the contact, as opposed to directly running into somebody and making it slow in the first instance, and then just being there first, win that race over the ball nice and square. And if you can do that, you're in a pretty decent space. Otherwise, I think the referees are blowing the whistle pretty early. So they're rewarding that jackal effort a lot more, I suppose, is what we've seen so far.
Yeah, which is really positive to see for me, because I never liked that terminology of surviving the clear out. it wasn't good for player welfare, although respectable to see a guy taking that many shots and winning the turnover. I want to go back right to the start with the ball carrier, because that's also a change. No more second dynamic movement. And really in Irish rugby, I suppose players have been used to that. It's been a demand almost on them to work hard on the ground. How big a shift is that?
Yeah, look, it's massive. I suppose sometimes now when you get your nose through, I suppose in the past you were going, this is exactly what we want. I'm finding now that people are recalling in behind that initial tackle very, very early. It's particularly the predominant jacklers, so people who have a natural aptitude for it, and they're getting rewarded massively. But as you say, Murray, before you could have bought yourself 200-300ths of a second to get the support player there. Unfortunately, now if he's not there, the chances are you're going to get penalised. And I think, look, I watched 5 of the Prem games last week just to get a gauge, but the penalty count is up around 28 to 32. So it's quite significant now, and it does have a bearing on how you approach the breakdown. So as I said to you, if you're not there, you're in trouble. You can't crawl or, I suppose, maneuver a shoulder or hide a hip. Them days now, unfortunately, are gone. So look, it's open season. You have to be massively accurate in how you approach it.
Coach to coach, Jimmy, I know you don't want to give too many secrets away, but have you adapted any of your drills? Let's take the jackler does win the race slightly. Used to be back in the day, you could, sort of separate arms. You could come in and smash the sort of window around the hips and lift them off, or squeeze arms together. Obviously, neck roll is out now, but croc roll is a terminology. Some of the coaches watching this, have you adapted in any way?
Yeah, look, most definitely. I think probably the big focus is around that first support player and the ball carry. So it would have been in the past 90% of the focus on the ball carrier, and you're responsible. If the ball doesn't come back, we would always have a look at it's something, Sean, you haven't done in terms of your contact carrying the ball in, and 10% the first support, second support. So it's 5 and 5 between the two of them, depending on how good a job he has done. But now it's looking like 60-40 in terms of ball carrier, 60% focus, and the support player's job has increased. So the dynamic of it and the efficiency of how quickly and how accurately you get there over the ball is massive. And look, I just quoted some of the game this morning from the weekend, some of the games this morning, and look, it's very much that case. Is the ball carrier could have done a good job, but the support player is just a tad too late, and then you're into a reward scenario. And then there's other elements around as well. Before, it was a very much tackler, assistant tackler, ball carrier in that order, and that's how the referees would have adopted the focus. Now we're seeing there's a tackle made, but the jackal can be in there in place. So it's getting the balance between what's, I suppose, in low and what's applied in low, and that's where we're working at the minute, and working very closely with the referees. And we've had George Clancy in with us the last couple of weeks, and that's been fantastic. And I suppose, like a coach, you just want consistency, and they've been consistent, and that's all we want as a coaching staff. Once there's consistency, then you can probably eliminate the grey for the player. But going back to your initial, I suppose, observation, yes, we've modified. We've tried to isolate the ball carriers as much as we can, and put as many obstacles as we can in front of the support player. So yeah, look, there's quite a bit of traffic there at the moment around the tackle. And that's something I think that will develop in the next couple of weeks when we get a couple more games under our belt.
Yeah, Murray, I think it might be good for us now to highlight something about the referees that Jimmy mentions. Young Adam Jones had his first Guinness Pro 14 start on the weekend. The Ospreys Dragons at the Liberty Stadium. Jimmy, you mentioned there about winning the race to the ball carrier. There's a not rolling away from the tackler. Talk us through this one. This is Rhys Webb running an inside support line.
Yeah. Okay. Is that Ollie Cracknell on the ball?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that situation there is when he's, I suppose, had that line break and the emphasis on the support players to get to him and get square over the ball is a challenge on those line break scenarios, because he's made a good line break there, 20-30 meters, and he's wrestled and he's fought really, really hard, I suppose. But your support has to be directly over the ball. If you're not directly over the ball, that jackler has, as I mentioned earlier, he's got a bigger target now. So I suppose as Ollie Cracknell felt, I suppose, parallel to the goalpost there, and you've got a big window. And as I say, Sean, he can get an elbow, he can get a wrist, he can get a hip. You've got multiple moving forces there, and you just have to be so accurate and so efficient. Any leg time is being punished, and look, it's just encouraging you to be accurate, I suppose, is the big thing.
Yeah, last one I want to touch on is that angle. Like we saw it there, and you mentioned it there, the angle of the approach, and it used to be that 45 degrees was okay, but it seems even stricter now. You gotta square right up.
Yeah, you do, and I think it's difficult. I suppose when the jackler is in that position, like you've got the width of the shoulders to aim at, and if you don't win that headspace and that time over the ball, you're probably riding up along the side of the shoulder or into the guts, and it's when you have that force moving at such a speed, you're going to end up 45 degrees on an angle anyway. So it's more the finished picture. The entry picture has to be right, and if the entry picture isn't accurate and square, chances are you might get pinged for something like that. And look, I think credit to him, it was a good shout, good line break, but that's the risk reward is in the balance at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating area. Listen, Jimmy, thanks so much for giving us the insight. Really appreciate it.
No problem, fellas.
And listen, unfortunately, we're out of time for this week. Sean, thanks a million. Really enjoyed that. Your insight, as always, was superb. And thanks to everyone who got to this point watching on. Really excited for all the Guinness Pro 14 Rugby this weekend. And we're already looking forward to next week's edition of the Analyst Eye. Don't forget to use the hashtag, it's Analyst Eye on Twitter if you want to ask us any questions. But cheers for now, and we'll catch you next week.